Chapter 9. Mel. I couldn't believe this. All these murders in our small town. Not to mention all 3 victims were witches, which was weird as all hell. I had so much going on in my brain, and I had to push those things aside to get a grip on the situation. I said my goodbyes to Colt so he could be with his mother, and I headed back to the coffee shop. It was already later in the evening, so Oliver was just getting off when I came through the door. "Hey, I'm ready, Mel. You have great timing," he told me as he walked over. "Change of plans," I said to him as I turned away. "Come on, I'll explain on the way." He just nodded with a confused look on his face. Since Oliver didn't have any powers, he didn't hear the message Mom had sent to those in our coven. He followed me out to the car, climbing in and buckling up. "So what's going on, Mel?" he asked. "A summoning has been called. All witches and warlocks, hell, everyone in the coven, your dad included, will be there," I told him as I began to drive. He was quiet for a second. "Is this about those 2 murders your dad was investigating?" he asked, looking out the window. "Yeah. It turns out there were 3 coven members killed, plus an attack on another witch along with a human man." "Wait, 3 witches now? A witch and a human are involved, too? Why didn't I hear about this?" "This just happened last night, actually." "Well, shit," Oliver whispered as he glanced at me. "So are we picking up Cece?" he asked. I rolled my eyes. "No, she will be there with Mom and Dad already, I'm sure." "Then are you dropping me off at home? This is a meeting for the Coven, right?" I glanced at him. "Oliver, you may not have abilities, but you are part of the Coven just like your father. You share the blood of a warlock. This concerns you," I said seriously. I considered Oliver as much a part of the Coven as anyone else, though he wanted nothing to do with that side. He was always very respectful of the families in our tradition. Any time there was a meeting, Oliver never came with his father. He just felt like he didn't belong in our world, and I couldn't blame him for that. We had known each other for a long time. We had a strong bond, and it wasn't just because I protected him from a few bullies. We both just felt like we didn't fit in, and that's why we stuck together. "All right, if you say so," he replied quietly, staring out the passenger side window. I didn't like to be serious, but now wasn't the time to joke around. We sped off to meet up with the Coven. I could already feel the magic pulling me in the direction of the lake. "Vincent." I sat in the back of our shiny black car while my mother and father spoke in hushed tones. My sister Brittany was not invited to this summoning. Mother would not let her attend due to her lack of magical ability. According to my mother, Brittany would bring shame to the family name. A powerless Cassio was not the image she wanted to project. Though she favored my sister, she still had to put on a show. I was reading, or trying to, but all I could hear was my mother. "An emergency meeting should have been called days ago. Why are we waiting until the 3rd murder? One of the victims wasn't even a witch. It was some Russian boy and that unlucky witch girl," my mother hissed to my father. "Mother, it still involved a witch," I pointed out to her as I looked up from my book. "Watch that tone, Vincent," she growled, looking at me through the rear-view mirror that hung above her head. "Well, it is true, dear. Besides that, we can't just call meetings whenever we please. It has to be a sure thing. You know how complicated that spell is." My father tried to defend Denise Price. "Well, you know what I mean. I just don't understand why the Prices are in charge. Obviously, they are not fit to lead," my mother shot to my father. I sighed and shook my head, looking down at my book. Here we go again. She would drone on and how much better we are than the Prices. It didn't matter how small the mistake or how they did things. Didn't matter how it was explained or defended. My mother would still poke out the flaws. She just couldn't accept that this was how things should be. I personally liked the Prices. Mrs. Price always made the best decision for our Coven, it seemed. She always put our well-being first. They, also, seemed like a real family that wasn't done up in plastic and porcelain. They were real, and I was envious of the connection they all shared, unlike my family, who only cared about money and power. Mostly this was my mother, but my father did not interfere, speak his mind. Her status meant more to her than the fact that our own kind was being murdered and attacked. It meant more to her than her own children. She would go so far as to pretend her daughter did not exist at these meetings. In the end, I just hoped we would figure this out, and I wondered who the culprit would be. Soon we arrived at the meeting spot and climbed out of the car. My mother began straightening me out, making me stand tall and proud as she pulled my cape around me. Each high-standing family had a crest and cape to represent them. My family cape was done up in black crow feathers, and the hood was a crow's beak. Our family crest was obviously the crow. It symbolizes intelligence, flexibility, and density. Some believe the crow was a symbol of death and bad luck, but it was truly a bird of mystery. I was always rather fascinated by their lovely black feathers and their dark tendencies. When my mother was finished, she dusted off the shoulders of my cape and placed her hand under my chin to make me look into her eyes. Remember what I said. Do not blend, Vincent. You are a Cassio. She gave me a proud smile and released me. I just nodded in response. She turned away, hooking her arm with my father's as we headed inside. All around me, witches and warlocks alike were dressed in their colored and furred capes. They whispered to one another, making their way inside. I followed behind my parents slowly, stopping when I felt eyes on my back. I turned my attention to a figure in the shadows on the left. I met a pair of mysterious green orbs as the figure stepped from the darkness. Those eyes belonged to a strikingly beautiful woman, dressed in a long red skirt with a crop top that left most of her dark skin exposed. She had curly dark hair and a smile on her pretty dark lips. Her eyes stared through me as if she was reading my very soul. She smiled, placing a finger to her lips. Her many bracelets jingled as she did. Before she mouthed, "Your life is a lie." I could read her lips perfectly, but my expression didn't change. What? How did she know? I whirled back around when my mother called to me. "Vincent, what are you doing? Keep up," she hissed. I glanced back to where the woman had been, but she was gone. Was she ever really there, or was I losing my mind? She was going to be burned into my memory for the rest of my life, those green eyes passing right through me and into the truth. Cece. Almost everyone arrived at the same time. The cavern was packed full. It was eerie seeing the dark cave lit by torches. The voices of everyone echoed off the walls around us. Our small town only had a population of about 5,000, but out of those, there were around 115 witches and warlocks, not including the members from other towns. All were present now, which made our surroundings very loud. I spotted Mel and Oliver and began to make my way towards them. I had to give Mel her cloak. Our family crest was a dragon, and our cloak was made from beautiful blue-green dragon scales. The reason for this was because one of my ancestors had a dragon as a familiar. That dragon had given its life to protect our family, and when it died, it became our symbol. It gave its eye, which was enchanted, to protect our Book of Shadows. No one could ever open the book unless the eye of the dragon recognized them. Along with its eye, it gave us its scales, which cloaks were fashioned from. Dragon scale was fireproof and can act as armor. I handed Mel her cloak immediately before turning to Oliver. "I'm glad you're here," I told him. I noticed a faint blush reach his cheeks. "Yeah, Mel brought me." "So you took my advice?" An oddly familiar voice spoke from behind me. I whirled around to find the same exotic woman from the club the night we met Noah. Her dark curls bounced around her face. "What?" I asked her. "I told you someone was very interested in you that night, and now it looks like you've acknowledged him." She nodded towards Oliver, whose mouth dropped wide open. "Oliver? You must be confused. It was Noah who asked me out that night," I gaped in complete shock. The feelings coming from this one. Her perfectly arched brows furrowed in confusion. She rested her piercing green eyes on Oliver. It was as if she was looking right through him. "I won't say any more, but maybe you should," she said to him like a warning, before backing away and melting gracefully into the crowd. "What is she?" I started to ask Oliver, but was cut off. "Thank you, everyone, for coming. It seems we are in danger," my mother's voice echoed around the cavern. Mel, Oliver, and I pushed our way through the crowd towards where she was standing above us on a small ledge. "I know it has taken us a while to assess the situation, but last night was the final straw. Our mother was so good at speaking to a large crowd, she had everyone enthralled. There have been 3 murders, all witches and all different culprits. I do not know if there is one party behind it, or if these attacks are random, but I did have a vision late last night. My vision showed me death and blood, witches fighting an unseen force. That is why I have called you all here. Together we are going to get to the bottom of this. Vincent." Everyone's attention was on Mrs. Price as she spoke of her vision. Some of the other witches and warlocks began to whisper in hushed tones about the incident. Some even sounded scared. At least that's what I could hear from the spot in between my mother and father. "Oh, is that what you have decided after the 3 murders have already occurred?" my mother snarled at our Pathfinder. All eyes had turned on us now, and I looked down, pulling my hood over my eyes to hide my face. I knew what was about to happen. My mother loved being the center of attention. I used my gift and blended into the shadows around us, taking a step away from my parents. I did not want to be associated with them, nor did I want people to see me. "Please, Lauren, there is no need to get angry. We had to be sure before we called a summoning like this," Mrs. Price said calmly. She didn't raise her voice or give in to my mother's venom. "So, waiting until we have lost 3 of our kind is appropriate before calling a serious meeting?" my mother shrieked. God, please make her stop right now. This was ridiculous, and I could hear the mumbling getting louder. My mother had put everyone in a small panic. Some were questioning the decisions of our Pathfinder already. "Hey, you got some nerve! You know as well as anyone else in this room that we can't call a summoning unless it's a last resort," I heard a girl exclaim. I looked over to see a familiar trio. It was Melissa Price who spoke out, but at her sides were her sister, Cecilia Price, and their friend Oliver. The 3 were always together. I had seen them every now and then when I was in town, and for whatever reason, Mother made me go with her. It didn't surprise me to see Melissa speaking out like this. She was never reserved like expected. She was constantly in trouble, and my mother seemed to love the idea that a Price was not perfect. I looked to my mother, who was red-faced. "Excuse me? You have no right to speak when you can't even stay out of trouble yourself," my mother shot back. "That has nothing to do with you starting an uproar against my mother. She couldn't call us all here without knowing the facts," Melissa defended. Her sister, Cecilia, grabbed her by the shoulder and pulled her back. "Mel, that's enough, okay?" she said, trying to calm her down. "Yeah, Mel, calm down," Oliver joined in. "You should listen to your sister and the powerless Carver boy. Keep out of grown-up business," Mother spat. "Powerless Carver boy? Don't talk about Oliver like that. He is just as much a part of this coven as you and your daughter," Melissa hissed. Cecilia and Oliver held her back as she tried to lunge forward. She had angry fire in her icy blue eyes. "Those born without powers do not need to be here." "Enough. Now is not the time to be bickering amongst ourselves." Our Pathfinder quieted the room. "Let's work together, not divided. We need to discuss what we are going to do and how we plan to protect one another," Miss Price continued. I looked to my mother as she glared daggers at the Price family. She was not yet satisfied. "If I was in charge, things would be different," she mumbled to my father, and I shook my head, looking back to the trio. I then noticed the mysterious woman from earlier standing not too far from them. Was she new to the Coven? At least I could say she was not a figment of my imagination. The moment my thoughts turned to this woman, her eyes met mine, which was impossible. I was still cloaked by my gift. If someone looked this way, all they would see was blackness. Yet here this woman was looking directly at me. Could she actually see through my powers? Colt. It took a while for everyone to really calm down after the confrontation, but Miss Price made sure the situation was under control. I could see Mel steaming with anger across the cavern. I wished I could be by her side, but I needed to be with my mother. She needed the support more. Interestingly, I was just a few feet behind the ever-loud Lauren Cassio and her husband Chad Cassio. Their son Vincent had been nearby, but had just vanished as soon as his mother opened her mouth. I don't blame him. I would have booked it too. I moved aside as an unfamiliar woman, who needed to put on some actual clothes, slid by me. I couldn't deny she was hot, but no one compared to Mel in my mind. She stopped a few feet in front of me and whispered, "I can feel you even if I can't see you." At first I thought she was talking to me, and I tilted my head in confusion. Before I could reply to her, I heard another voice answer her. "Is that your gift? Being able to feel a person's presence?" the voice asked. "Not exactly." They spoke very quietly. I could barely make out what was being said, but I was a nosy person, so I slid a little closer. "I'm able to read a person's feelings and desires." "Interesting." Where there was only a shadow, a man appeared. He was tall, with cold, icy eyes and a black feather hood pulled over his head. I recognized him immediately as Vincent Cassio. It was the family cloak made of crow feathers that gave it away. "I can feel that you are more than just interested," she whispered vaguely. "Who are you?" Vincent asked. "Raella Nicole Bola," she answered. I couldn't help but notice her soft accent, and the way she rolled her R's. "Bola, your family is legendary. Almost all of you ended up with the gift of sight and became pathfinders of your own covens. I've heard India is beautiful, so why did you come all the way to America?" "Some parts are beautiful," was all she replied with. Raella lifted a hand to push her thick hair back, and all her gold bracelets jingled together. That caused the Cassios to turn and glare at the woman talking with their son. "Get over here," Vincent's mother hissed at him. He gave Raella an apologetic look and returned to his parents' side. "I don't want to see you around that woman ever again. Look at her. It looks like she's wearing half a shirt. You can see more of her than you can." I could hear the venomous voice of Lauren Cassio as she pretended to whisper only to her son. Raella remained stone-faced, and I couldn't help but feel bad for her. "Ignore her. That woman's just a bitch." She turned a too-wise for her age smile on me and said, "Do not pity me. I am happy with who I am." I had no idea how she glided so silently and gracefully in the insane high heels she was wearing, especially within the uneven stone ground of the cave, but she managed to slip past effortlessly, her long skirt brushing against me before she disappeared into the crowd. "Mel." I was fuming, and just hearing that woman's voice made me want to punch her right in her smug face. Lauren Cassio, the biggest pain in the ass I had ever known. She was always questioning our mother and trying to turn everyone against her. I even had a hunch that she felt the Cassio family should be in charge of everything. She was too wicked for that kind of power in my eyes. I glanced over to see the snake pulling her son away from a familiar young woman. I looked the woman over. She sure was comfortable in her own skin. It was the same woman we had seen outside the club a few days ago, and only moments ago. She seemed to pick up on emotions or something like that. She could read people, which was freaky. Her and Colt exchanged a few words before she brushed past him. Did they know each other? No, I was pretty sure he would have addressed her before if he had. Oh, I tried to ignore it. An unwanted feeling bubbled up inside me. I felt a weight on my chest and my stomach turned. I dug my nails into my palms. "What's wrong? Jealous, Mel?" Oliver asked from beside me. He had been watching my expression. "Mind your business," I snarled at him before turning away. Me jealous over that stalker? Hell no. He could talk to whoever he wanted. I didn't care. "Now, if I could have everyone's attention again, I'd like to discuss our next course of action," my mother said. Everyone's attention was back on her now. The room fell silent, waiting. "We have to keep each other safe, and this also means the younglings," Mom continued. "What I propose we do is set a curfew for the young ones and teach them some spells for shielding." I rolled my eyes. Great. So we were going to be on a strict bedtime and even more classes on basic spells. That should be fun. I sighed, running my fingers through my hair. I do not want it to stop there, either. "No one will go out alone. We must stick together and protect one another. Call if there is danger," she continued. Then her eyes flickered to mine, and I felt like she was staring into my soul. She had that stern mother look on her face. "I expect the inexperienced to not get involved or try to lend assistance. While the help is appreciated, the risk is too high," my mother warned. The message was pretty much just for me, wasn't it? Boy, she was going to be disappointed. Cece. I sighed heavily, watching my mother and sister argue with their eyes. I wished Mel would just stay out of trouble. Our mother just wanted what was best. "Parents, make sure you keep track of your children." Our mother finally broke eye contact and looked right back into the crowd. "We will hold a spell training course tomorrow night around 5. Anyone who doesn't know the simple shield spell should come. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns?" All eyes turned to Lauren Cassio, who scowled and shook her head. "Good. Then I hope to see a lot of you tomorrow, and be very careful on your way home. We will get to the bottom of this soon." As soon as we were dismissed, everyone started talking and gossiping. "I hope you aren't planning anything stupid," I said to my sister. "Never," she smiled, a very fake, innocent smile. "Seriously, Mel? You will just get in the way. So whatever you are planning, stop, now. It won't hurt to just get a sense of what's going on. Keep watch, investigate. If I actually see anything, I'll run in the opposite direction, Mel shrugged. What? I squealed with irritation. That's how you get yourself killed. You're such an idiot, Mel. What are you going to do? Patrol the city streets every night? Oliver added, disgusted. Hey, that isn't a bad idea, Colt said as he joined our group. I mean, we would just be like a night watch. We could report anything we saw back to your father. He's the chief of police, right? I would really advise against that. We all turned to see Riley. Thank you. I moved aside to give her room to enter the little circle we made. Why? We won't fight. If we see anything, we'll run straight to the police station, Mel defended. And we could patrol in pairs. But why? Why bother when your dad probably already has officers out there doing the same thing? Plus, they're all trained. Oliver made a good point. Sure, but most of them are human. Very few warlocks or witches are on the force. They would be defenseless, Mel defended. You just say that you wouldn't try to fight any threats you saw? You said you would run straight to the police. Riley was on to something. So if you're complaining that the police would be defenseless, then why would you run to them if you saw something that needed to be reported? Unless you're just saying that so we would all go along with your plan. Maybe you hope that you can be the one to catch the killer. Or maybe you think you're stronger than the vampire or whatever it is that is attacking our people. Riley kept grilling Mel, not giving her a chance to defend herself. Honestly, Riley sounded like a detective. I think Mel is just worried and pissed off. She doesn't like feeling useless, even though in this situation she obviously is, Oliver said while Mel silently glared at Riley. Here, a soft, velvety voice called, slipping into our circle. Take these. I casted protective charms on them. Raella, right? Colt asked the mysterious woman. Yes, and you're Colton Collins. She pointed him out, then moved to the next. Riley Tesler, Oliver Carver, and of course Cecilia and Melissa Price. Thank you, but how do you know all of us? I asked as she handed us each a gold bangle bracelet. My mother, she was a seer, gave me a list of names and told me to find you in America to fulfill my destiny. There are 2 missing from my list, though. She sighed, pursing her full lips in worry. Who? Riley asked. Vincent Cassio. I met him earlier. The name that troubles me is Nikolai Victor. I can't seem to find him anywhere. The rest of you are in this coven. I thought he would be too. Recognition sparked through Riley, Mel, and myself immediately. Raella picked up on it. Do you know him? She asked, with her soft accent. He's at our house right now, Mel answered. Colt eyed her with suspicion. We should go there. We should all be together. Do any of you know how to get a hold of Vincent? He and his parents left as soon as they were able. But I feel like we all need to meet. Something will happen, I know it, Raella insisted. Vincent. We couldn't get home soon enough. My mother had given me an earful in the car, and not only that, she went on and on about tonight's meeting. She could just not let it go. It was all starting to weigh on me too much. Would you please excuse me, I asked, stepping from the car and heading up to our overly large house. I didn't give my parents a chance to grant my permission. Vincent! Vincent! My mother called after me. I pretended I couldn't hear her as I opened the door to our big house. To my surprise, I found my sister lip-locked with an older man. I shivered in disgust and cleared my throat loudly. She pulled away, scowling at me. Oh, I guess you're back, Brittany sniped. Oh my, a house guest, my mother asked, her tone changing as she came through the door behind me. We could all see the older man had money, which meant my mother would suck up. Yes, this is Mr. Drake. He's my boss. I just started at the offices downtown. He was here to discuss my promotion. She gave the man a seductive look, and I almost gagged. Without waiting for the continuation of the conversation, I took off upstairs. I slammed my bedroom door shut, locking it and heading over to my bed. My mother called out to me, and when I didn't respond, she began to schmooze with Brittany's boss. I wasn't in the mood for any of it. I reached over to my nightstand, opening the small drawer at the top to retrieve my headphones. I slipped the buds into my ears, plugged up my phone, and started my playlist, propping my hands behind my head. I fell onto my bed, staring up at the ceiling. It took me a while to relax and close my eyes, but I managed to lose myself in the sounds of violins and soft piano. I could no longer hear the flirting or feel anything around me. It felt like hours that I laid there alone. That is, until a pair of bright eyes entered my thoughts. They flashed, glowing in the dark. I quickly sat up, removing my earbuds, and looking around my empty and dark room. Not being able to shake the feeling I was being watched, I slowly pulled myself from bed and headed to the window by my desk. I stared out into the night, catching a glimpse of the moon. It was dark and quiet. An uneasiness stirred within me. Someone was here with me. I could feel it. I turned around, facing away from the window. "Who is there, and what do you want?" All I could hear was the drumming of my heart. Was I just being paranoid? There was no one to be found among the shadows. Just then, my closet door burst open, slamming into the wall. My clothes went flying from the hangers. My shelves came toppling down and onto the floor. Something was in there rummaging. I slowly approached the door. Standing in the doorway, I could see nothing. The clothes had stopped flying and everything was just scattered at my feet. As I stepped closer, a gust of cold wind rushed at me, knocking me into the wall. I slammed the back of my head hard as I slid down to the floor. Everything around me was beginning to blur. It felt as though I might pass out. Footsteps were coming towards me, but my vision was going. I couldn't move my body. It was heavy and I couldn't focus. Something was standing over me. I could feel the uneasiness squeezing me. I felt someone grab me by the collar of my shirt, lifting me from the ground, but I still couldn't see anything through the blur. I pushed myself to keep awake. Is this the best a Cassio can do? Such a shame! I expected more from such snobs. A voice echoed around me. This did not make any sense. Werewolves and vampires were one thing, but an invisible creature? This wasn't like the other attacks at all. "Don't worry, boy. I'll make it quick, and then I'll deal with your family," the voice chuckled. It was human, and yet had a strange timbre to it. I willed my mind to focus, pulling the shadows all around me into myself. The sensation through my veins working its way through my body. I felt myself becoming one with the shadows. I freed myself from its grip as my form was now insubstantial. The entity took shape, looking around the room. I still couldn't make out its face, not even gender. My head pounded and I had to try and stay focused. "Vincent! Oh, Vincent Cassio!" the figure sang out as it drifted around the room. It knocked things over. My tables, even my mattress was toppled over onto the floor. The pounding in my head increased, pushing and pushing for me to sleep. I didn't know if I could hold this for much longer. The figure showed no signs of leaving. I moved myself through the shadows on my ceiling, slipping to the window. That was when the pounding became frantic. I lost my concentration, landing on my desk. "Shit," I groaned out, but got up to my knees. I turned my window, yanking it open. From across the street, I could see a familiar snow-white owl with black spots perched in a tree. It was Beryl, and he was staring at me with his unique eyes, one blue and one yellow. "Where are you going, Cassio?" the voice chuckled. It was at my back. I shook my head, slipping out of the window, and shimmied down the side of my house, letting myself follow the shadows out onto the sidewalk. I stood, whistling a command for Beryl to fly and find help, and I prayed he found someone. The figure's eyes were visible, a bright yellow pair of orbs, in the darkness of my room. I could hear it laughing as it floated from the window like a ghost. Moving away from the house, I ran, not knowing how far I would get, but I needed to get away. If it kept following me, then I wouldn't have to worry about my family. I ran along the sidewalk, pushing my pain away. Anywhere was better than here. Cece. "Well, this is our home. Nikolai should still be asleep on the couch. It usually takes humans a while to wake up after I heal them." I glanced to Oliver. Oliver was the only human I had ever healed before this. There was one time Mel was teasing him because she was able to climb big trees and he wasn't. She called him a scaredy cat, which upset him. We were probably 10 or 11, so he decided to try and climb the tree and prove her wrong. He made it up to her, but slipped and hit his head. He was knocked unconscious immediately. I had been under the tree reading a book. At first we thought he was dead, so we ran and got our parents. We were just freaking out. My parents realized that he was still breathing, so I healed him. After that, we took him to the hospital. The doctor said he was perfectly fine, but they were really confused, because a fall from that high should have at least given him a concussion and bruising. It took him 2 days to wake up from that. Mel and I led each member of our group into the living room where Sly and Nikolai were both still curled up on the couch. The little raccoon peeked its head up as we entered and sniffed and went back to sleep. Before we could take a step towards him, though, a big orange fluff ball came strutting from behind the couch. Yo-Yo huffed indignantly at Mel, but oddly went straight to Colt's feet and began to circle around him. From my right, a soft, rumbly caw sounded. It was Star, perched on one of the indoor trees we just got for her. It only took us a second to realize those 3 weren't the only familiars in the room. In fact, I counted 6 familiars. The first one I noticed was a big white and black spotted owl, who was sharing a perch with Star. The largest and probably most startling was the huge gray and white timber wolf sitting next to Nikolai's head. It was at least 3.5 feet tall on all fours, and easily was the biggest animal I'd ever seen. Lastly, underneath the couch, I could see a little pink bunny nose twitching. The rabbit edged out just enough to expose its floppy black and white ears. "Why are all of these animals in our house?" Mel gasped. "Yo-Yo, stop that," she added, looking down at her cat, horrified. "How did any of you get here?" Colt went over, not even flinching away from the wolf, and grabbing the bunny from under the couch. "Familiars are magical too, let's not forget, and they are the most intelligent creatures in the world," Raella added, getting on her knees next to the wolf so she could give it a big hug. It was taller than her when she was on her knees. "Who does the owl belong to?" I asked. It was the only familiar who had not been claimed. "Is it Oliver's?" Colt asked. "No, I don't have a familiar," Oliver replied. "What about him?" Mel tilted her head towards Nikolai. "He's definitely human." "It's very, very rare for a human to have a familiar," Riley replied, attempting to lift her fat raccoon from Nikolai. Sly grabbed fistfuls of Nikolai's beard and refused to let go, so Riley gave up. "Besides, apparently Sly is going to be Nikolai's familiar now." She rolled her eyes. "Wait, I sense something." Raella got up and walked to the owl, holding her arm out to it. The bird hopped right onto her. "Oh no, Vincent is in trouble." Before any of us could reply, Raella kicked off her high heels and ran out the door. The wolf and owl followed her without hesitation. "We should go too," Oliver said. We were all in agreement, and we took off into the darkness after her. "Find him, Baron," she ordered the wolf, and with blinding speed it took off into the forest. "What's happening?" Mel asked, through staggered breaths. "I don't know. I can just sense Vincent. He's terrified. The owl is his. It came to find us so we could help." There was a panic in Raella's voice. We didn't stop running until we got to a brightly lit street. All of us were gasping for air, and I was worried we were lost, but Raella seemed to know exactly where we were going. Vincent. I wasn't sure how far I could make it, darting into the trees and kept to the darkness. I couldn't feel it following me, but I knew not to look back. As trees surrounded me, I knew I had made it far enough away from the house. Eventually, I stopped, pulling myself up into a tree. I hoisted myself up onto a branch, winded and tired, attempting to calm myself as I leaned my head back against the rough bark. I closed my eyes, concentrating on my heart. Everything was quiet and eerily still. My head was still pounding, and I was fading from reality now. There was no strength to open my eyes or move a muscle within the safety of the tree, but this secure feeling didn't last long as the silence was broken by a deafening howl. Adrenaline shot through my body and I sat straight up, looking around. Below me, pacing around the tree, was a giant wolf. It jumped up, putting its paws on the trunk, staring straight up at me. On its hind legs it had to be at least 6 feet tall. What the hell was I going to do now? This night could not get any worse. Another sound caught my attention. Heavy footfalls, heavy breathing, a group of people running. I pushed myself forward, looking past the wolf. "Hey, stop!" I yelled out. I had to warn them about the wolf. The group of figures ran straight below me, inspecting the tree, not caring that a giant wolf was next to them. Vincent Cassio?" a familiar voice asked, looking up to me as she put a hand on the wolf's back. The figure had green eyes and a feminine physique. It was the woman from the meeting, the one that spoke with me before my mother pulled me away. Beryl landed on my shoulder, hooting deeply. I let out a breath and looked to him. "Beryl, you got me help. Thank you," I whispered gratefully as I reached out, scratching his head softly with my index finger. He cooed, and I looked to the figures below. "I'm coming down," I told them. Colt. Everyone was relieved to see him alive. We all watched as he climbed down from the tree and warily eyed Raella's wolf. "What happened?" she asked when he was on solid ground. "I was attacked. Vincent's hands shook slightly. I don't know what it was exactly. I couldn't see it. A ghost, maybe? A demon? Where is it now? I asked, glancing around. I had an uneasy feeling, and I knew I wasn't the only one. I don't know. I lost it on the road. I escaped out my bedroom window and ran through the streets. It followed me until I got to the woods, then it just disappeared. Guys, Oliver began, we need to get back. A low warning growl vibrated through the wolf. Baron agrees. Let's go. It will be safer at Mel and Cece's. Raella grabbed Vincent's hand, and we all made our way back to the house. We were all too worn out to run back, so we kept a steady, quick walking pace. I continuously scanned the trees around us. There was a dark presence. We could all sense it, including the familiars. I wrapped my fingers around Mel's wrist lightly, just in case we needed to start running again. I wouldn't risk getting separated from her. Whatever was going on was just too crazy. Witches getting attacked? All by different monsters? Was the supernatural world out to get us or something? Had we done something so horrible we deserved being picked off one by one? Cece. We finally got back home. All of us rushed in, and Mel slammed and locked the door behind us. We gathered in the living room around Nikolai. I counted to ensure no one got lost. Mel, Colt, Raella, Vincent, Riley, Oliver, and myself. Of course, all 6 familiars were present as well. Star and Beryl on the bird tree, Sly on Nikolai's chest, Colt's rabbit and Yo-Yo hiding under the couch, and the ever-present Baron, growling while staring out the window. After I was sure we were all as safe as we could be, I flipped off the lights and joined Raella and Baron, who were both at the window. It would be easier for us to see outside with the lights off. Baron can sense something out there. I can feel what he's feeling, but it seems to be cloaking itself from my gift somehow, Raella whispered. I noticed Mel grab her phone and dial. She put the phone on speaker. Hello? Our mother's voice answered after a few rings. Mom, don't freak out, but we just found Vincent Cassio in the woods. He was attacked by something but got away. There are about 8 of us in the house right now. Long story, and no, we weren't throwing a party, but whatever attacked him is outside. The familiars are growing crazy, but we can't see it, Mel tried to explain calmly but quickly. Wait, Mel, slow down. Are you and Cece okay? Is everyone okay? I'll be over there in just a second. No, Mel and I yelled at the same time. Just get Josh and stay in the house. Where's Dad? Mel asked. He got called into work. Listen, I don't see anything outside, and I don't sense anything. Are you sure there's something dangerous out there? We lived in our parents' guest house, so she could see us from the upstairs window. Trust us, it's out there. Where's Dingo? I bet he could sense it. Dingo was our mother's familiar, an old rat-terrier dog that was always watched over us as kids. I think he's with Josh. I'll trust you. Listen, do you have candles and sage? Mel looked to me and I nodded. Yes, we do. Good. Everyone grab a candle, and one person needs to smudge the sage around the house. Stay together and walk through each room. As you walk, repeat the protection spell that I taught you both when you were little girls. Do you remember it? I remember it. The simple one, right? Dragon Soul, Heart of Sage, Mel said. Yes. The simplest one of our family's protection spells. Calling upon the dragon for protection is the best thing you can do while in danger. I ran into our kitchen and grabbed a stool. We kept our emergency Wiccan box on top of our fridge, but hidden behind our bread box. I grabbed it and yanked it open. We had a small stick of sage and a whole bunch of candles and other things in there. I took only what we needed. Mom, I felt my heart pounding as Baron's growls got louder, his hackles raising. Oh my goodness! Girls, quickly! I see something. It's coming out of the tree line. I gave everyone a candle. I can't find a lighter, I started to panic, throwing all the kitchen drawers open. Don't worry, I got it, Riley said, and with a snap of her fingers, all the candles lit up. Okay, chant with me, everyone. Dragon Soul, Heart of Sage. I lit the sage with my candles and started leading everyone around the house. I could hear my brother and brother chanting with us on the phone. We could hear whatever was outside, scratching on the walls. It was looking for a way in. As we smudged each room and chanted, we made sure that each door and window was locked. The thing wasn't solid. It was invisible. All we could see was this odd distortion of space as it followed us room to room. We glimpsed outside every window we passed. I felt like it was attacking my very spirit, and with every room it got more and more agitated, until it began banging on the windows. When we made it back to the living room, we all joined hands, making a semicircle around Nikolai, who was in the most danger because he was unconscious, and kept chanting. I wasn't sure if the thing out there was a negative spirit, or a demon, or something else entirely. But if it was a demon or spirit, then it could possibly possess Nikolai, since he had no way to protect himself while asleep. All the familiars had gathered around us as well, and I could feel them lending their power. The house was so charged with energy that even though we were all terrified, the creature was repelled. We could hear it howling with anger, but it stayed at least 10 feet away from the windows. We watched it pace back and forth for a long time. We didn't stop chanting until we saw it sulk back into the woods, which happened to be about the same time that the sun began to rise. None of us moved, though. We waited and stared at the spot it had disappeared. I let out a small scream, and everyone jumped when we heard the frantic knocking on our door. Mel was the first one to run and open it. It was our mother in tears. "Is everyone okay?" She flipped on the light, and my eyes watered. "I think so." I looked around at all of the people in the room. There were silent nods from everyone. "What was that thing?" Riley asked. "That was a demon." My mother turned her eyes to Vincent. "Is that what attacked you?" He just nodded. "Someone needs to explain to me exactly what happened before you called me." Her face turned stern as she looked around at all of us in the room. Everyone found a seat, and Mel launched into the explanation, starting with meeting Riella at the Coven meeting and everything that happened after.